I think a lot of it is lack of planning in the first place. It's not being clear about what we're trying to achieve and not being clear, therefore, what we need to do to get to what we want to achieve. Builders predominantly aren't property investors. They predominantly don't understand the HMO legislation. They don't generally understand the rental market in any particular area. And a lot of them are still thinking that we need to paint everything magnolia.
Yeah.
If that property doesn't deliver the income you want or the sales figure you want because you left it to the builder, well, that's your fault.
Martin, I heard recently that you saved somebody £120,000 on a 2-hour call.
I did, yeah.
Tell me how that worked.
Well, so this was a property investor who had tendered his project out to a number of builders. All of the builders came in way over his budget and he couldn't really understand why. And what we established was that the architect had over-specified a lot of the scheme. The architect had probably designed his dream house rather than a commercial development project. So rather than chipping the builders, we actually chipped the specification.
Right.
And that was what led to £120,000 saving.
Well, so basically it's the finish and how it looks, the property, and even maybe some of the construction is revisiting some of that to get the cost down, as opposed to let's just try and knock some money off the builder's quote.
Yeah, absolutely. Had he gone to the builder would have largely said, well, these are the prices for what you want.
Yeah.
So we went from the other direction and said, well, is what's specified actually realistic? And you're right, some of it was part of the fabric that was over-specified.
Yeah.
As far as there were acoustic partitions between bedrooms and things, which the average house doesn't need.
Yeah.
And then other things were the quality of the fixtures and fittings. We don't need marble countertops in all kitchens, and paring those back a little bit.
Yeah, that's interesting because that makes me think about when people talk about, what's the typical cost per square foot or square metre of building? And, I've heard a number of kind of £2,000 a square metre typically being kind of bandied around at the moment. But that all depends on what the finish and the specification is going to be. You can't just take a number like that, assume it's going to be roughly the same anyway.
Absolutely, and that is the challenge. The key thing is, what are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to achieve entry-level housing stock for first-time buyers or even social housing? Or are you trying to achieve top-of-the-range, smart penthouse apartment type serviced accommodation?
Yeah.
There's the prices vary. So a lot of people that I see pricing or giving indications of price per square metre can be wildly adrift if they haven't understood the market they're trying to achieve.
Almost guesswork.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's your background? How did you get involved in kind of looking at project costings and helping investors and developers with projects?
So my background's construction. I left school, I worked for a building contractor as a quantity surveyor, which is the person who looks after the finances of building projects. Drifted from just solely quantity surveying into project management and estimating. Always been on the management side. Very much from the context, well, if something needs doing, I'm not going to grab the screwdriver from the garage and do it. I'm going to find the right people to do that work.
Yeah.
I worked for a number of contractors, mostly around the London area at that stage, mostly doing refurbishment, conversion, some good quality work.
Yeah.
And then set up my own construction business. Struggled to get the same quality work because I hadn't got the pedigree of a business. And someone said to me, go along to this property meeting, they'll surely want builders. And I did my little 20-second pitch, and there was a queue out the door of people that did want to build. And I got really excited that I'd found this little niche of people that needed some work from me. Started working with property investors and very quickly realised that things that I knew as fundamentals, they just didn't know. And I suddenly realised that even though we had a massive crossover, they had enormous knowledge that I didn't have about how to buy properties creatively and no money down and those kind of things. But I, in turn, had enormous amounts of knowledge that they didn't have. And having had a while running a building business, I realised that I was getting a bit fed up managing building projects directly. So I said I was going to become a consultant and solely work with property investors as their project manager and quantity surveyor. And then later on, property investors were saying, look, Martin, on the smaller projects, we can't afford to take you on as a project manager, and I wouldn't argue with that at all. They were saying, can you run some training courses and can you teach us the process of effectively managing a project from start to finish, so that we can get better value.
Because as investors, and when we talk about property investors, we use this label, investors, when we want to buy property and make money from that property. We're not generally getting involved in rolling up our sleeves and doing the construction work and stuff. So it is about managing that process and understanding, well, actually, before we even start the project, we need to try and work out what's the end goal we're trying to achieve. What do we need to do in order for that to happen? What needs to change in the building? What are going to be the costs of that? What unforeseens could there be? There's so many things that we sometimes don't think about or unaware of, and it's trying to avoid that. I guess it's a common saying, everything costs more and takes longer. Why do you think people experience that?
Well, I think a lot of it is lack of planning in the first place. It's not being clear about what we're trying to achieve, and not being clear, therefore, what we need to do to get to what we want to achieve. So when we're trying to sell the property and the estate agents say, well, you've got more chance of selling it if you deliver this or include that. Oh, well, I'll do that, but now it's a premium because we didn't plan it in the first place. And I think, time is money. Everyone wants to buy a property and turn around a refurbishment as quickly as they can. But it's very easy to bring a builder in on day one. Day two, the builder's saying, well, I need to know the kitchen layout because, my electrician's coming in tomorrow to run some cables. And people will say, well, I haven't even thought about a kitchen layout yet. I hadn't got that far. And one of the things I teach is to slow down, to speed up, because it will definitely save money in the longer term. It might feel back to front. It might feel that we want to get in there and get tenants in as quickly as possible at the back end. But it is about planning the whole process through. And that's very much what I teach, that we can't delegate this to anyone else. We are ultimately in charge.
Yeah.
If you can delegate it to anyone, it's a project manager that will ask the right questions. But largely, we can't say, well, Mr. Builder, come along and just build this, because builders predominantly aren't property investors. They predominantly don't understand the HMO legislation. They don't generally understand the rental market in any particular area. And a lot of them are still thinking that we need to paint everything magnolia.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if that property doesn't deliver the income you want or the sales figure you want because you left it to the builder, well, that's your fault.
Yes.
But ultimately, that goes right back to the beginning. Did we even buy the right property in the right area? Yes, the estate agent said it needed refurbishing and it was ideal for property investors, but does it actually create, can we create the right property for the market in that area? So the project, the management of the project starts from, I've got the property to go and look at, right the way through to final disposal, or maybe final rental, depending on how you manage that.
And when looking for a builder, what do you see as the most common mistakes people make when instructing somebody to come and do a project for them or trying to get the quotes?
I think lack of clarity in what they want the builder to price. And this was where I was when I was running building projects. I was having investors walk me round a property and tell me what they wanted.
Yeah.
And the first thing I was thinking was, well, they're going to meet another builder in an hour's time. How do I know that they're going to tell that other builder exactly the same?
Yeah.
Or that other builder is going to interpret the things in the same way as I have? And so what I encourage every investor to do is write down what you want. This is the kind of kitchen I want. This is the style of kitchen I want. This quality, this colour, maybe this supplier.
Yeah.
This is what I want in the bathrooms. I want shower boards in the showers, or I want tiles in the showers, because that's what builders will start to guess.
Yeah.
And if they guess, they'll probably go white, which may not be what we want, or they'll just put very low figures against them on the basis that eventually you'll tell them what you want, and then they'll say, oh, I've allowed for white at this price, and you want multicoloured at this price. And of course, there's always a margin added in at that point. And this is where some property investors say, oh, the builder's ripped me off. He possibly has crept the prices up, And for me, that's where I was.
Yeah.
Just 20 years ago, I was that surveyor working with indecisive clients that changed their minds. And of course, we made a margin off the back of it. And now very much I'm on the other side saying, be clear what you want. Tell the builder what you want before they price.
Yeah.
And if you show to a builder that you've got some good drawings where appropriate and a well thought out schedule of works, what you'll find is that builders are happier to price. The builders that say to you, oh, I'm too busy at the moment to price, may be saying that because you've not demonstrated that you're actually going to be a credible client.
Yeah.
And why do they want to work with someone who's just going to give them a hard time and chip them away because there's indecision and uncertainty as we go down the line?
So when the builder's quoting, when we've gone around, says, right, we want a 6-bedroom HMO out of this building, we want 6 bathrooms in there, and we want a big TV on that wall, price me up the job. We've not given them very much to go with. And so they've got to work out the cost of creating what their interpretation of what we've asked them to do, and keeping the cost in such a way that actually leaves them a profit, probably basic items, as we said. And so when we talk about things end up costing more and taking longer, well, they end up costing more because we weren't clear from the offset what we want. So those things need to get repriced. And of course, that also means sometimes additional things need to be done, which hadn't been considered, and it can take longer as well. And by not planning, we'd be so much worse off further down the project.
Oh, absolutely. And a classic example here is, a fire alarm. As a property investor, we understand what fire alarms we need in buildings. Builders don't know that. Yeah. So if you've got a big property and you convert that into a 3-story HMO, they don't know there's a fire alarm needed necessarily. And I talk to property investors and they say, oh, I had this problem because I realised I couldn't let it without a fire alarm, and I did really well and got it sorted out. And I kind of wind it back and say, actually, had you told the builder that you needed a grade A fire alarm, he would have put it in a source. You won't have all of the cables showing or the little plastic mini trunk in. And by the way, it probably would have been cheaper as well when you had all the ceilings down to run some cables through. And this is about starting again with some knowledge about what you're trying to achieve, and acknowledging that the builders generally are not experts in this, as I was. When I had my own construction company and someone was asking me to price an HMO, I'm thinking, what's an HMO look like? I'd never seen one. I'd never been in one in those days. And I think because I'd got a management background, I asked questions. Some builders just won't ask questions. They'll just kind of blag it. They won't. They're too proud to ask. Yeah. And that's where you'll get unclear prices. And the builder that's the cheapest has probably made the biggest mistake in the price, because he hadn't realised that when you were talking about an HMO, you needed a fire alarm, and he didn't realise that you wanted an ensuite in every bedroom. He thought there was just one bathroom on each floor or whatever, and it wasn't clear, and off he goes, and then you're not getting what you think you wanted. And of course, by the time you've got the right price from him, that builder's price, which was rock bottom, is now higher than the next people up who possibly did price it correctly. And that's kind of where I was as a builder, finding that I was losing projects because I was almost too diligent. And it was like, do I go and just put in the rock bottom price to win work? Yeah. And that didn't work for me. That wasn't my values. That's not how I wanted to operate. Or was it, being clear with my clients what I would have allowed, and they'd say, well, you're too expensive, Martin. And that was really what caused me to say, well, hold on, what if I just started helping property investors get this stuff right, that everyone would then have a much better project.
Yes. So if somebody's starting out on a project and they've not done this kind of thing before, they're early in their journey, they're about to renovate or flip their first property, for example, and they know they need a new kitchen, a new bathroom, for example, it needs to be redecorated, maybe a few of the little minor repairs along the way. How could they approach that? What is it that they need to do you think, to make sure that this project turns out the way they would like it to turn out?
Well, the first thing is be clear what they're trying to achieve and who is the market. Who is your end tenant? That's right. Your end tenant, your end guest, your end purchaser. What does that look like? The answer is not whoever the letting agent finds or whoever the estate agent finds me, because ultimately you're going to end up with a mix-up.
Yeah.
So it's start with that end product in mind and then work backwards. How do I create that end product? What do I need to do to this property to create that end product?
Yes.
Likely we're talking about new kitchens and bathrooms, but do we need to, have we got an old-fashioned style property that just needs modernising? Have we got legislation to comply with as far as HMOs and service accommodation to a certain extent goes? And just then work backwards. Okay, so to get to this is what I need to do. So how do I tell the builder how to do this? How do I write this? And you don't need to use any complicated words. Generally, builders understand English. Generally, they don't need technical words to do most of this work.
It doesn't need technical specification.
No.
We can keep it as simple as
If anything's technical, that's where you've got an architect doing you some building regulation drawings where there are some technical requirements. But otherwise, look around your own house and look at all of the things in your own house that is an option.
Yeah.
There are lots of different types of door handle.
Yeah.
Right. Well, what do you want? What's right for your style? There's lots of different types of doors. There's lots of different types of kitchens, of bathrooms, of tiles, of flooring, and all of those other things. And ultimately, that should all be your decision as the building owner, because if you don't get that at the end, if you miss the market, that's when your valuation is going to be chipped. It's when you sell for less, or you rent for less, or you get more churn on your tenants because the tenants just don't feel that it really works for them.
Yes.
And they just move on all of the time.
Yeah. At the beginning, when putting this type of a specification together, what you want the builder to quote for, people talk about, we get 3 builders in and we'll put the middle quote and we'll just go with that. But we've already talked about that could be interpreted in many different ways. You could have 3 different interpretations. So actually the quotes aren't actually even quoting for the same thing. Now, mind the fact that they might have priced it differently. But when we've got the information we want to give them, how much detail do we go into? Is it a case of, this is the handle I want on this door? Or at the first stage, is it a kind of less level of detail? I guess the question I'm asking is, how much detail do we need to provide for a builder to really be able to quote us properly in the first instance?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, because it is very tempting to put too much detail down. And to some extent, the more lines you put on your schedule of works, the more prices you're going to get.
Yeah.
And no one prices anything less than £100. So if there's a line, it'll get £100 by it. And that means that the price goes up. So it's about paring it back to something that is sufficiently detailed to get a price. Now, take door handles, for instance. We could say all of the door handles to be supplied by the client. So now we haven't got to make any decisions at this stage. We don't know. We'll go out and have a look when we get there.
They're just doing a labour price for that.
That's right. And largely door handles are door handles.
Yeah.
They're the same price, whatever they are. Or we could say, well, let's just put an allowance in for door handles. But I find on a lot of my projects, particularly my own projects, because I'm pretty much doing the same in every property, it's just as easy to say to the builder, well, buy these door handles. This is what I want. Yeah. This is my standard specification. But the things I'll do to make it easy is I'll say there are 8 door handles needed, and there are 4 of them need locks in them, and just help the builder price quickly. I won't necessarily give the builder the prices, because prices go up and down, but I will at least give them a bit of help.
Yes.
Because my view is, and this was where I was when I was pricing projects for builders, is I want them to want to price my project. I don't want to make it complicated. So if I've given them some of the quantities where it's obvious, 8 doors, 8 door handles, then I'm going to get a price quickly for those. But I think it's a fine art to keep it short enough that there's detail, but detailed enough that you're not going to get the builder to come back.
Yeah.
And I say to anyone, your first schedule of works is not going to be your best, but your next one will be a bit better.
Yeah.
And I write schedules of works frequently. Could I write a schedule of works that is 100% perfect? I'm going to have to work really hard on it. I can get well over 90%, but there's always a chance you're going to miss something out. There's always a chance that something doesn't get described quite as well as it might be. All you can do is just learn and get better and better. And, to some extent, if you're doing them for your own deals, copy and paste, learn. The first one will take you hours to do. Yeah. But once you can start copying and paste.
Yeah, so just going back to the door handle, it could be there's a standard door handle or two types of door handles we use depending on what we're doing, and we just know that's what we want to include.
That's right. Yeah. So whilst it feels nice to make every one of your properties different, it will be much easier at the refurbishment stage if they're largely the same. But even when you're managing property, if you've got a portfolio and you get a message that a door handle's broken, well, that's fine. I always buy the same door handles. They're still available. Yes. Therefore, I haven't got to pop round and say, well, what does the door handle look like there and where do we get a replacement from? We can tell the handyman who's going around it, you need to pop into this place and they'll sell you the door handle, or I've got what you need. So it makes it easier in the longer term if things are the same. And I look at my portfolio, I can see how it's evolved, how we've learned the things that look good, the things that work, eliminated things that don't quite work. And I've got some paint colours in some of my early portfolio, which actually after a few properties we realised we didn't like. But now most things are the same few colours, the same few styles, and we just rinse and repeat.
Yeah. And there's always some involvement as things go on. You always find different things, newer things you like, you want to introduce slightly. It's unlikely you'll go from one finish to something completely different on the next one. It's making those
just involved.
So there's some standardization.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to go back to something that you mentioned, is that I want the builder to price my job. And I think that's something people struggle with. They get somebody around to look at a job for them. And, well, first of all, people may not even turn up to look at the job. And let's say, for example, you had 5 people you've asked to come and quote. 2 of them may not even show up. 3 of them show up. 2 don't even provide a quote. What can we do to avoid those kind of common problems that many people see? Because there's so many things that we could do differently to prevent that from happening.
Yeah. I think the key thing here is to come over to the builders as a credible client. If builders are busy, builders expect to price an element of work in competition, but they want to know that they're in a fair competition because everyone's got the same document and largely the same interpretation of the same project. So if you come over as haphazard and disorganised, some builders are going to say they can't price. And I know that because I was on the other side pricing projects. And our standard answer to those kinds of clients were, really sorry, we're too busy. We weren't. We could have taken on, we were big enough businesses to be able to take on anything. We would bring in the right resources to do it. But our standard answer was, I'm really sorry, we're too busy. And one of the mistakes I see property investors making is they don't talk to enough builders in the first place. I talk to a lot of property investors where they've engaged one builder because that was the only builder who priced, because they only spoke to 2 and the other fella's gone on holiday. So now we've only got one price. We think he's ripping us off, but we had to use him because I don't have anyone else. Whereas what I teach is talk to lots of builders and don't necessarily look for the good builders. Look to eliminate the builders that aren't going to be right for you. Perhaps they are too busy. Perhaps they're too small for the project, or they're too big for the project. Perhaps they just don't work in this part of the town. Perhaps they don't come inside the motorway or outside the motorway or whatever. Perhaps they specialise in new build and you've got a refurbishment, or vice versa. And I encourage everyone to be looking for builders on a continual basis. And so if I see builders doing projects near where I know I've got a project coming up, I'm taking a photograph of the signboard. I'm taking a photograph of the sign written van. I'll talk to the builder if he's there and I can, and just start building a relationship so that when I've got a project that I want pricing, I've perhaps got a long list of 6, 7, 8 contractors. I can talk to them all, and one will say, well, actually, I'm going on holiday, or one's too busy, but now I've still got 5 that I'm going to price. And then when I send them the documentation, I'm aiming that I'm demonstrating that this is a viable scheme. When they say to me, what's the budget? I'm giving them a realistic figures that demonstrates that I've thought it through. And they're not thinking, well, hold on, that's £50,000 every day of the week, and he's told me it's 20. No point in pricing this. I'm not going to get this. I'm going to be beaten by some cowboy. it's just being credible, and then builders will genuinely want to work for you. And as a property investor, we're way miles ahead of the general public as far as potential clients for builders, because hopefully we build a relationship with the builder and we keep working with the builder. Whereas members of the public save up their money, they build one kitchen extension, probably never use a builder again. They might recommend the builder to one or two friends, but we can be repeat clients. And I'm working with the same builder at the moment who's I've been working with now kind of since lockdown, so for nearly 3 years or so, 2.5 years. And a lot of the time he's not even in competition. He doesn't know that, but I know that I can trust him. I know he delivers what he needs to deliver. I know his prices are fair and reasonable. I've got experience of putting prices together anyway, so I can see that a little bit better. And he will negotiate prices with me. I know for a fact he doesn't make loads of profit from my work, but he gets continuity. He can make profit elsewhere. What he wants is continuity, and he knows that largely he doesn't get messed about. We don't change our mind. He knows that I help him out, and it goes easily. And really, that's really what we all want to find.
Yes.
We want to find that builder that we can build a good relationship with, because we don't necessarily want to be engaged in the cheapest builder. We want to be engaged in the best builder. The cheap builder that's going to take twice as long to do it doesn't help you out. You might as well have the best builder, delivers the project. There's no defects, there's no snagging, nothing breaks at the end of it. When he says he's going to finish by this date, by and large, he finishes by that date. That's worth so much more than a cheap builder.
Yeah. In a moment, I want to talk about managing the actual process itself. But just before we get onto that, so what we're talking about in terms of the pricing of the job, it's really an admin type role. Somebody's got to sit down and work it all out. How much is it going to cost to do this thing? And I guess most builders, when they're doing that, they're not earning any money when they're sitting trying to crunch those numbers. So in your experience, how much detail they go into? Was it a case they look at it and think 70 grand should cover it? Or do you find that some really go into the detail of, okay, I need this many handles, this can take this many hours to do this, and they spend a fair bit of time trying to price it up?
So at our level, smaller builders doing smaller projects.
What would you define as small in terms of monetary value?
I suppose projects up to 50 to £100,000 kind of, and maybe even more. It depends. I suppose if it's a really complex project, they're going to spend a lot more time on it. So when I was estimating for builders, I was taught how to break everything down, work out the cost of every component part, work out how long it's going to take each tradesman to do it as a quantity surveyor. What I teach property investors now is how I was pricing projects when I was managing the building project company, which was all about, as you say, turning volume round. It's very much, well, from experience, I believe that these products are going to cost me this amount of money, and my carpenter is going to take 3 days to do it, and he wants £250 a day. So it's £750 plus a bit of material, so I'll put £900 against that. And that's how a lot of builders are doing things. There's going to be some items where they need to do a little bit of research. They need to check some prices out, and sometimes they'll send a little bit of a shopping list off to some of their merchants to get some prices for some of the specialist bits and pieces. But a lot of the specialists, they're probably passing down the line anyway. So if you've got a central heating system in a property, they may well be just passing that whole thing to a plumber and saying, you give me your price for the plumbing element. And that's why you might have broken down quite a lot of plumbing in a project, but you just get one lump sum because he's passed it to his plumber and his plumber's given him a lump sum for doing it. And this is how some builders are given a lump sum for the whole project. They're pretty much saying, well, I did a project like this earlier on in the year. I charged that fella £70,000. This is pretty similar, but I didn't really make much money from that, so we'll go in 80 on this one.
Yeah.
And that's the logic, price done. Those kinds of prices almost suggest that the builders are pretty much in a take it or leave it basis.
Yeah.
And when you go back to them and say, can you break it all down? Generally, they can't break it down because it is
they haven't costed it
very much finger in the air. £80,000 will cover it. And the problem with these finger in the air prices is it's not until you get into the nitty gritty do you find that perhaps it should have been 65 or perhaps it needed to be 90 and the builder's found out that actually it should have been 90. He's partway through it and now he's looking for any reason to find additional prices.
Yeah.
So I don't really engage any builder that won't break their price down, but I fully expect a lot of those prices to finish with 2 zeros.
Yeah.
As far as the £100, £150, £500, where they've just put some money in the right place, and as long as they look about right, and this is really how I teach property investors to do budgets in reverse.
Yeah.
Break your project down and put sensible figures against it. How much might it cost? And you won't be 100% accurate on any of them, but across the board, some will be a bit high, some will be a bit low, and you'll be pretty close generally with a little bit of experience. And that's what builders are relying on, getting pretty close and then making it work for that price.
Yes. Moving on to the actual management of the project itself and then the implementation part, we touched on the builder may subcontract the electrics out somebody else, the heating out somebody else. So in effect, are they being a mini project manager and then just passing all the trades out?
Well, yes. And I suppose to some degree, it's what do you describe as a project manager? And what I always say is the person who is managing individual tradesmen, be them people that work directly for them or the electrician, the plumber that are, working for multiple builders and coming in and providing resources. If you are managing at that level, you're pretty much a foreman type of level, maybe a working foreman doing some work yourself, but you are at foreman level. And when I was managing larger projects, we would have a site manager on site whose job was to coordinate all of the trades, make sure they had the materials, make sure that that there weren't people drilling a hole while someone's painting next door, all of that coordination. But that is a grassroots foreman type level. Some builders will have what I was as a project manager, where I'd have multiple projects going on, a manager in charge of each project, and then I would oversee, I would help them get the resources, help them find the materials, help them buy some of the materials, manage them, give them targets, and liaise back with clients. That was a builder's project manager. But even when I was a builder's project manager, no one really discussed with me the logic of some of the conversations that had happened 6 months or longer ago when the building was being acquired, when there was a lot of discussion as to how we're going to get the best use of the space, what's the market, what are we aiming for. That all went on beforehand. So there were decisions that I couldn't make on site because I didn't know the background. And so this is where I say to property investors, even if your builder comes with a project manager, you've still got to manage that project manager, because ultimately it's your property and your project is this long. The builder comes in and fills this little slot, but it was you that bought the property, it was you that worked the budget out, it was you that worked out what your end goal was. It was you that engaged an architect and put in maybe planning consent and have done all of this up here. So you can't expect the builders necessarily to make the right decision here because he didn't get involved with that discussion. So there's this kind of 2 layers of project management really that you can't delegate everything to the builder. What you should be doing is asking that project manager or the builder the right questions to allow you to make the right decisions. So the builder says, we can't build this, it's not quite what we expected, or we've taken this out and there's a whole can of worms behind it. You should be asking salient questions. Well, what is the effect? What are the different ways of fixing it? What's the quick and cheap fix? What's the Rolls Royce fix? What's the middle of the road? What's the cost of those? What's the time impact on all of this? And now with that information, as the head project manager, you can say, right, in this case, this is the solution I want to go with. Might not be the cheap and cheerful, because a lot of builders think property investors want everything cheap. Actually, if we're going to hold this building for the next 10 years, we don't want it cheap. We don't want it to break every time a new tenant moves in. We may well want the Rolls Royce solution, because but only we know that. In something we're selling, we might say, actually, we don't need to go to top of the range. We need it to look nice, but it doesn't need to be, tenant proof, as it were, because we're going to sell it on and it becomes someone else's problems. I'm not saying you should massively cut corners, but you can understand there's a level of
way
finish
to
there.
get things done. Yeah,
And the building owner needs to make that decision, and it shouldn't be delegated to a builder. Builders need managing.
Yeah. Our preference in a lot of projects is to just gut the property, because that way we'll clear everything out and we've got clean slate in terms of what we're starting with, and there's less unforeseens, and then try and create it the best finish we can, because we want to keep the property for the long term, or when we sell it on, it's the best thing they're going to get to a new build type finish. And that way, you've done the best you can. The chance of maintenance problems are minimal going forward.
Yes.
More investment now, but less problems later.
Yeah. I totally recommend that. Although interestingly, at one of my own properties, I've just done an 11-bedroom HMO. We did a lot of the bedrooms back to the brickwork as far as plaster goes, but the staircase and hallways we didn't bother because the way we knew that it was going to be financed on a commercial valuation. We knew the commercial valuation was based on the value of the bedrooms, and it didn't matter that there was some rippled plaster up the staircase, which, by the way, it's an old property, so it's part of the feature anyway. And I see some property investors almost going too far and ripping out things that perhaps don't need doing. And a little tip, this is something that a painter told me years ago. He said, from a painting perspective, if you're painting an office, the most important thing to get right is the back of the managing director's toilet door. And it's very much, what do you need to focus on? If the ceiling above the bed looks rotten and horrible, it could just be a reason for a tenant to churn. Whereas, if there's a bit of manky plasterwork behind where the wardrobe's going to be, perhaps it doesn't need doing. So it's about being, pairing one against the other and looking at this whole big picture. But you're right. If you go back to brick everywhere, you kind of know where you stand. As long as you've got the budget for that. And sadly, some property investors say to me, I'm going to go back to brick. Oh, what did you put in the budget in the first? Well, I wasn't going to do that in the first place. It was, well, where are you going to get this money from then?
It's completely.
And this is about starting with the end in mind. If you know you want a top of the range property, and to get that you need to hack off all of the plaster, then when you're buying the property up at the front, you need to have factored in that cost as part of the refurbishment, rather than try and chip it out of someone later on, or trying to negotiate with the builder to do it at half price for you as a favour because you didn't put it in the budget in the first place.
Yes. And when I first started refurbishing property, to save money, what I would do is try and get different trades into different parts of the project, get the plumber and get the electrician, the carpenter, etc. And what I found very quickly was I was running around picking up materials for them, carrying tiles up and down the stairs, trying to juggle budgets, make decisions on things on a fly that they said, well, what about this? Okay, just do this. And I just found that so difficult and frustrating to do. And it was, I was in a much happier place and I gave the whole thing to one builder.
Yes.
How can somebody determine whether they should be managing trades or they should give the whole thing to one builder?
So the one thing you didn't touch on there, one of the other shortcomings or difficulties is something turns up broken or missing. And you're trying to go on holiday and you've got a phone call from the builder saying you've got to sort this out and I've got a man standing here doing nothing. So that's one of the other challenges. The answer I always say to anyone who asks me that question is that you remember that foreman I was talking about, that you're valuing yourself as a foreman. And foremen are earning £250 a day. Whereas if you're up here as a project manager, you're valuing yourself at that level, and project managers are 400, 450, 500 a day. And of course, let's say you bring in a project manager and you go up to the next level up, which is much more the developer level, where I've got a professional project manager managing all it, you're now valuing yourself up here as £1,500 a day. So it's very much where do you value your time? I don't think it's easy to save any money buying all the individual materials. It might feel as though you've got a better deal, but you're probably going to miss something out. You've got to deal with things that go wrong, things that are broken, things that turn up late, and you're not valuing your time. If you weren't buying those tiles and driving around all the local merchants looking for the cheapest deal or hunting on the internet for the cheapest deal, you could be off buying another property. And you will make far more money on that next property than you will ever save on on this one here. So, yeah, do you value yourself as a foreman, a project manager, or a developer?
Yeah.
And really, we should all be aspiring to be that developer at the top, managing
It's more
other people.
strategic vision, direction,
That's right.
plans, what we want to do, rather than the day-to-day nitty-gritty stuff.
Yeah.
So before we get into then how do we manage how much we're paying the builder, what stages and things, let's just go back a step on something we didn't touch on, which is how do we find the builders to come and quote and work with us in the first place?
The two good ways that I still find builders, I touched on one already, is just seeing them out and about in the areas, working, engaging with them, looking for sign-written vans and signboards and things like that. And then the other way is internet searches. If you Google builder in your area, up will come an enormous list.
Yeah.
Some of those are going to be unsuitable. Some of them are going to be an enormous company with glossy offices in the high street with big overheads, possibly too big for your company. Some of them are going to be tiny little businesses. One man who drives around in a van could probably do a brilliant job, but he's still going to be there in 10 months' time because there's only him and his boy. So you can start to eliminate that way. But some of the directory sites on the internet will find you some good builders. You've got to do your own due diligence. You've got to do some research. You've got to take some references. You've got to hunt them down on the company's house, check they're still trading, check their bona fide businesses. But I would say for most of our projects, we're starting on the internet and just Googling. If we work out of an area, in the areas I know, where I am all of the time, I probably know 3-4 builders most of the time that will price projects. Mm-hmm. But if a client comes to me for a project that's not my core area, I might know 1 or 2, but we'll always try and find 6. Yeah. We always want to get 6 prices so that we've got an opportunity to select the best builder from those 6. Yeah. And it was just nice if the best builder is also the most competitive, but it doesn't always go that way. What I don't want to do, is present to a client, well, look, you've got to use this builder because it's the only price I got. Mm-hmm. That's not any good for me as a consultant, as a project manager, to say there is only one price, Mr. Client, because that's not me doing my job properly. I want to go and say, we've got 5 prices. We're not sure about the guy who's come in the cheapest. Yeah. The guy who's top of the tree, by the way, just isn't interested. Mm-hmm. There's 3 here. We'd like to meet with 2 of them, and we'd like to feel, and actually be in a position where we can make a decision. And that starts from have this big list in the first place. Be critical about who you're getting prices from, and be critical when, if you've arranged to meet builders at a site and they don't turn up and they've forgotten all about it. Well, maybe that's a reason not to use that builder. What if they can't make that appointment, particularly as you texted them the day before to confirm the appointment, and they've still forgotten about it, then don't look past those shortcomings. If you meet a builder and then you subsequently see them on Facebook and you don't like what they're saying on Facebook, then you're probably not going to be able to want to work together. So be critical. So the only way you can be critical is by having this long list in the first place, and just, that's another one I can't work with. Yeah. That's another one that's not going to be suitable. And then you'll find that when you've got the right builders, they will want to price. They have priced, and you've now got a choice. And so when the one you want to use suddenly can't start in time, it's like, well, it's not the end of the world because I've got another price. Yeah. I'm not being forced to wait. Yeah. I've got someone else who can price. He was a little bit more, but he's,
When we're looking online, which is, there's just so much information available to us now at our fingertips. How much should we rely on reviews? For example, what's the values of reviews?
A lot of these reviews, you look at the dates on some of these reviews, a lot of these companies have had to get testimonials to get on these platforms. Mm-hmm. Some of the platforms online are nothing more than the old-fashioned yellow pages. You maybe they paid, but often they get on there for free. And a lot of these sites, they're just full of clickbait. There's the companies, the builders listed in the middle, but all the way around the outside are the merchants and the suppliers. If someone's looking for a builder, they might want a kitchen, and they're just getting leads. They're getting paid leads for you clicking through. So they're not. A lot of these sites aren't really doing any research or due diligence into the builders at all. they might have said, well, you have to have 3 testimonials to get on there. To the builder, and it's no disrespect to builders, but the builders phone their mum, their sister, and their gran, and within a week they've got 3 testimonials on there, and and by the way, they're 8 years old, and no one ever has left a testimonial since. So you've got to do current due diligence into the builders. Look at them on Companies House. Look at them on social media. Go and see some projects they've done. Talk to clients they've worked with before. You might not do all of that before asking them to get prices, but you can do the basics. I've had people come to me and said, Martin, I think my builder's ripping me off. Can you help me out? And the first thing I do with anyone that tells me about a builder is I put it in Companies House.
Yeah. Because
I want to know the background. Oh, look, it looks like they were only set up a week before you engaged them. Did you ask them what they'd done before? Yeah. Oh, I didn't think about that. I've had builders, I had a lady come to me once, she said, I think the builder's ripping me off. I put it in Companies House. The builder was set up as an estate agent.
Right.
And it's like, well, it's no wonder he's not a very good builder. He's probably brilliant at selling houses, but he's calling himself an estate agent. He's not calling himself a carpenter. And, now he's running a carpentry business. That's encouraging. Yeah. That's what we want to see.
Yeah.
So the clues are often there. Very easy to find, unfortunately, for people that
Google names and things as well, and see what comes up, getting kind of views that way as well, different perspectives. When we're on going to look at a live project, for example, a builder might be doing, how much value should we put into how nice their van is, how clean the site is, kind of how well or poorly everything seems organized on site, whether their trades have got the music going full blast, or whether they're kind of, all these kind of perceptions that we have. How much should we interpret that as?
I think to a large extent, that's how you should be working. It's a gut feel.
Yeah.
How does it feel? How would you feel if these people were working on your site? And building sites are hard to keep clean and tidy. Yeah. But if it feels that it's reasonably well organised and that the people that are there are reasonably polite and reasonably nice people, and let's say you even get offered a cup of tea and the mug is clean,
yes,
that's a really good start. Because you'll know if you go into a property and there's builders there and the radio's blaring and the radio might be on, but if the radio's on and they turn it off, that's a good sign. If the radio's on and you're shouting over the radio and there's noise here and there's mud everywhere or dirt everywhere, and you nearly tripped over something getting in and there's an enormous hole that you could fall down, that's all negatives. And I'd like to encourage anyone to be critical and get away from this. Well, it was all negative, but he was the only person who priced. Well, he won't be the only one who's priced if you've got more builders on your shortlist in the first place. And you can be critical about these reasons not to engage with them, because they might be a good builder, but you don't want to be going and visiting part way through the project and just always coming out filthy dirty, or always worried that you're going to fall down a hole or something's going to drop on you. That's not where we want to be. We know it's a building site. We know that it is never going to be perfect, but it's that gut feel. If it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right. And you don't need to be an expert in building to know whether it feels right or not.
There's a lot of value in how you feel about something.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're going to engage a builder, you're going to be working with this builder for perhaps the next 12, 16 weeks or longer on a bigger project. And if you were engaging someone for your business to bring in a new team member, they might have a brilliant CV, which, by the way, is the builder's price. If you interviewed them and thought, well, even though the CV's great, I couldn't share an office with them, I couldn't work with them on a regular basis, we've got different values, I don't feel as though I like them, there's nothing wrong with them, it's just, you just don't hit it off.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be working with a builder that you just don't hit it off with, because there will be challenges and there will be things that go wrong, but you want to be able to talk to each other at a professional level, rather than thinking, well, I hated the guy from the start, and I didn't think we could work together from the first place. Actually, don't work with someone you don't think you can work with. Be critical And it all comes back to, you can be critical if you've got this long list and you've got a number 2. The problem is when you haven't got that number 2 or even 3 to go to.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk about then, we've started the project, we've given the job to a builder, and payment terms. It's £100,000 project. It's going to take 10 weeks. Do we just pay 10 grand a week? Is that how we would...
Absolutely not. So payment terms are totally flexible, totally negotiable. So there's no hard and fast rule. I would normally recommend against by paying enormous deposits up front. Some builders will insist on the deposit, but I generally don't want that to be more than a few £1,000s, just enough to perhaps secure the slot in the diary. Yeah. Show some commitment that you are ready to go in 4 weeks' time when he finishes his current project and you've got a genuine scheme. Anything more than that, you've got to acknowledge that in the worst case scenario, the builder could take the money and disappear. So if you're paying tens of thousands, and I hear of some people that pay tens of thousands in advance, you've got to accept that in the worst case scenario, you could lose that. Now, when it comes to paying builders, it doesn't matter whether you want to pay them every Friday, every Monday, every 2 weeks, every 4 weeks, whatever you want to do, as long as you're both happy with that. My advice is to only pay for the value of the work they've done. It's very easy for a builder to say, yes, 100 grand, 10 weeks, pay me 10 grand. It's very, very hard to do £10,000 worth of work in the first week. It's stripping out with some labourers, and a couple of skips have turned up, and we've dug some trenches for a foundation. There's no real value in that. That first week might only be £3,000-4,000 worth of work. The materials, the boilers and the electric fittings and the doors, and that's where the real value is, and that's further down the line. So if you're paying builders based on the value they've actually achieved, you've got much less chance of overpaying them. And this is unfortunately what some builders manipulate clients into doing. They manipulate them into overpaying, and then right near the end of the project, they've got £5,000 left to pay, but actually they've got £20,000 worth of work to do. And the builder's thinking, well, I'm going to have to spend quite a lot of money to finish this one off, and I know I'm only going to get £5,000, so this is a bit less important because I've got this other project around the corner and they'll start paying me £10,000. And we've got in this scenario where we're now kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul, and the builder's got no incentive to finish. You need to incentivize the builders to finish, and be careful that there is always a financial incentive for the builder to finish. And the good builders won't be thinking like that. And go back to building a relationship with a builder. You will accidentally overpay some builders, but the good builders just will deal with it. They'll just say, actually, I think I have overcharged you, but it'll all come good next week because I'm going to do this. And by the way, next week, don't even bother trying to pay me anything because I think you paid me too much last week. The good builders will do that and look after you because they want repeat business and they want to build a relationship.
And there's a lot of good builders out there. We often, unfortunately, hear more about the poor builders, the shoddy builders, and that's what kind of creates the stories, as it were. But there's a lot of great builders out there, no doubt about that.
I think set out with the mindset that most builders are good. There are some people who see it as a sport to trip up builders, and it's easy to trip up builders. It's easy for anyone to be tripped up if you want to go with that mindset. But if you go out with the mindset that most builders are going to be good, most builders want to work for you, most builders want to deliver a good project, but flip it on the other side, make sure you are a good client and that you're giving the builders the opportunity to deliver. When the builder says to you, I want the kitchen's going to be installed next week, get the kitchen there on Wednesday the week before so that it's there. If you say, I've got the kitchen being delivered on Monday morning, what'll happen is you're the third delivery. By 8:30, the carpenter's standing on site saying, where's the kitchen? How am I going to earn any money? There's no kitchen. He phones you, you say, it's on the way. By 9:30, it still hasn't turned up. He's thinking, how am I going to make money? By the way, I know the lady round the corner, her kitchen's been delivered. She'll be delighted if I phone her up and say I can do it a week early. Your kitchen turns up at 11 o'clock. By then, the carpenter's gone to another job. And that's a week's worth of work. And now your kitchen's gone in late. And the builder's saying, well, it's not my fault that the carpenter disappeared. You got the kitchen here late.
Yeah.
So think about how can you be a good client? How can you help the builder out? And builders, as with everyone, can lose their way. They're in there every day of the week. They don't always step back. Just step back, help them, ask some questions. What are you doing this week? Oh, I'm building these walls this week. Oh, have you got the plasterer lined up next week? The builder will say yes. He might not. He'll be round the back phoning the plasterer, but you've just asked a question that's prompted him to think, actually, I'm not sure if I've got the plasterer lined up next week, because this is what happens, and this is not the true thing, but this is kind of what goes on. The following week, you say, oh, where's the plasterer? Oh, his van broke down. No, he didn't. He was on another job because the builder forgot to book the plasterer in, and as a result, he's got 3 days' work. These vans that have broken down and are off the road for 4 days, that's not how it works, because if a plasterer's van does break down, he's hiring a van so he can carry on his business.
He's on lose work.
It's an excuse because the communication broke down. And some of these builders are brilliant at building, and they can make some amazing things happen on site, but they're not so good at managing. They're not so good with their paperwork and their admin. And they're being supported perhaps by their wives, and their wives only really spend time on a Sunday afternoon helping them out when they're watching the EastEnders Omnibus edition. And so they're not focusing on management so much. So if you can help them out and just ask some questions and help them deliver a good project, you will get the benefit in the long term. Don't see it as a sport to trip them up and, well, I could have told him to get his plasterer, but I thought I'd let him fail, because it's going to come back and cause you the problems in the long term.
Absolutely. And they're going to try and cut corners to save money if you constantly try and squeeze them.
That's it. But if you help them out, they're also going to want to come back and do the next project, because they know, actually, I enjoyed working with this person.
You're a good client, you paid them on time and stuff. There were little issues, there was very little friction.
Yeah.
So in terms of how involved we are and how much communication there is with the builder on the project, do we turn up every day at 9 o'clock and stay till 4 with them, or do we kind of just ask them to ping us a WhatsApp once a month with a video update, or how far do we go?
Yeah, it's definitely between the two. Yeah. My rule of thumb is I plan to go to all of my projects once a week. Now, interestingly, I spoke to a builder once. I had a project down on the south coast, and I said to him, I'm going to come once a week. He says, yes, you can come. He said, you need to get there at 12:15 on any day. Get there at I said, what happens at 12:15? He says, I have my sandwiches, and you can talk to me for half an hour. Right. But he said, you come any other time, I'm not going to stop because you're paying me to work. Yes. And it's like, this is really interesting. Yeah. He wants to deliver, he wants to work, and he's telling me that if you come, you're going to be wasting my time.
Yeah. If you're chatting there for an hour every day, that's like, if you did that 4 or 5 times a month, well, that's half a day.
Where all that time is. And I've seen people, I've heard people say, oh, my builder ran over by 4 weeks. I had to go there every single day, and he overran by 4 weeks. Yeah, every day you went there, you delayed him by another hour. And when now we add that up, oh, look, that's 4 weeks extra. That's what happens. So I say maybe twice in the first week or two if you really want to get them started, maybe twice towards the end just to help them get it over the line. But generally once a week. Yeah. Generally, for most smaller projects, you don't need to be on site for an hour. By the time you've walked around a whole lot and sorted out a few things, and the questions to ask the builder is, review the progress. Are we still on time? Are we still on budget? Have you got any problems? Is there anything foreseen that's going to cause a problem? Because there's no point in you having furniture lined up to be delivered for your HMO only to find the builder hasn't finished. You don't want it to be a surprise at the end. You need to know that there's some challenges coming along. Is there anything I can help you with? Anything you're waiting for me, choice of wallpaper styles or paint colours or wall tiles or anything like that? Is there anything you need from me? Generally, how's it going? Anything else? No. Yeah. Let's just have a look at progress. Yeah, this all looks good. Keep an eye on quality as it goes. Again, we don't want to get to the end of the job and say, yeah, that bit of plastering's been shocking since 10 weeks ago. Tell him 10 weeks ago, actually, I'm not happy with the plastering here. You can see it. It's all wavy. It's gone wrong on this wall. Have those kind of conversations. But generally, if you've selected the right builder, you won't have to micromanage them. If you're on site micromanaging them, it almost certainly goes back to the point, actually, you didn't get the right builder in the first place. Sometimes you'll think you've got the right builder And and I've worked with bad builders, and you don't know until later on.
Yes.
But if you set out with the intention of getting the right builders, you shouldn't have to be there every day of the week.
Yes. Martin, this is a topic we can spend hours and hours on talking.
Absolutely, yeah.
So before we wrap up, what's one of the key things you think that's important that we maybe haven't touched on?
One thing we haven't touched on, it's a tough one. Because I think the big mistake I see investors making is they don't know what they're aiming for.
Yeah.
And I think
they're
they haven't worked their original budget out based on what they're aiming for and what it's going to cost. Ultimately, the end value of a property is fixed by the market.
Yeah.
It's fixed by our rental, it's the commercial yield, whatever we're going to do. The cost to deliver that is largely fixed by the market. The only price that is variable is the price you pay for the property in the first place.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't be saying, well, the agent had it on for 200 grand and I've chipped him down to 190.
Yeah.
We should be saying, when it's all finished, it's worth this amount. It's going to cost this much to get to there. I want to make this bit of profit in the middle. Therefore, I should be offering £180,000.
Yeah.
And I should be talking to the agent and helping them understand why that £180,000 is the right price. So don't start from what can I chip off the asking price. The asking price is just a way of getting you interested and talking to you. You should be calculating that asking price from the end valuation backwards. And that's where I see a lot of property investors not doing it. It's very much, well, I can get 10 grand off the asking price. This must be a brilliant deal. Often it's not.
Yes. And Martin, I know you work with a lot of our clients as well, our mentees. And what's the best way, or how can you serve other people that are in the property investing community?
So I've got consultancy. I've talked about project management. I've talked about quantity surveying. I can do that. Some tied up locally to where I am in Kent and London and the South East, but I can do it quite a lot remotely as well. And then I run training courses, and I've got training products to help property investors manage their own schemes for those that want to learn, want to grow, or are managing smaller projects, and it doesn't justify a consultant. So the easiest way to get hold of me is actually to go to my website, which is refurbishmentmastery.com, and there's a button at the top that says book a call, and book a free 20-minute call with me, and let's have a chat and let me see how I'm going to help.
Courses on free online as well, YouTube videos also,
absolutely,
booklets as well. Online.
Yeah, so on the website you can pick up a free copy of my refurbishment handbook, which was a book I wrote for property investors to help them understand the whole big picture. There's over 1,000 videos on YouTube of me talking some of the things I've talked about today, but lots of other little snippets. And the Refurbishment Mastery Facebook page is reasonably active as well. There's quite a lot of content on there. So yeah, there's a lot of free content out there. I'm just passionate about helping property investors get it right.
Yeah.
Because it's not really something that any of the principal trainers teach. It's great. There's some great ways of buying deals out there, but don't lose all of that great negotiation you got on buying a deal by not understanding how to do the refurbishment and conversion as successfully as you might do. So, I fit alongside all the training you're doing, all of your community and others. I fit alongside nicely by bringing this little bit of niche. But because I'm a property investor as well, I also know, from the property investing world, that we've got to do it for a budget, and we've got to know who our tenants are at the end of the day.
Martin, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I really appreciate you coming out and speaking to us. It's something that comes up time and time again, managing builders, organising them, how to find them and stuff. So I really appreciate that, and with lots of what you've done for us as well over the years as well.
Yeah, it's been great. So lovely. Thanks very much, I appreciate it. Cheers.